Hey there YouTube, Tristan Blaze again, and I'm going to show you the deck that taught me how to play hardcore control for Magic the Gathering. This was, I think it was 98. I was 16 years old at the time. And this deck popped up. It was mono blue control. This is CMU Draw-Go. How it got the name Draw-Go was by the creator, Andrew Cuno. I believe his last name was Cuno. At Carnegie Mellon University, he was teaching. I believe I'm getting this story right. At Carnegie Mellon University, he was teaching somebody how to play it, and the guy wasn't doing it right, and he just said, "Look, stop thinking about doing anything. Just draw your card, lay your land, say go. Just draw, play a land, say go." And it got called Draw-Go ever since. So whenever you have a blue deck that draws their card, lays their land, and says go to save up for the counter magic on your opponent's turn, that's where we get Draw-Go from. Now, this deck was incredibly amazing. Number one, primarily because it basically was the very first mono blue Draw-Go control style deck. Now there were blue control decks back then, of course, but most of them were also blue white or like blue red counter burn. Okay, so I mean you'd have like counter spells, dissipates, stuff like that, but you'd also have REBs, pyroblast, for the counter matchups in the board. This just took it and made it mono blue. It took everything out and just was mono blue and just nothing else. It was also amazing because this was, as far as I know, at the time, and I believe almost ever since, the only mono blue deck that can win without ever tapping mana on your turn. You just tap it on your opponent's turn, and that's how you can win. And I'll show you how. First, you run 18 islands. 18 land. That's what you're running for your mana base. Moving over to your creature control, we have your 4 quicksands, which can take a 2 toughness creature out of the game single-handedly, or you can double up and take a 4 power creature out. And then of course we have our classic reset button, Nev Disc. Now I've actually, if you actually see this, these are from Commander, and I actually had to go and buy these because I don't own any Nev Discs anymore. That was a shock when I was looking through all my cards. I go, where'd they go? I probably sold them off when they, basically just didn't, they weren't relevant anymore. Landstill's not really a deck that's running Nev Disc in Legacy anymore, so I don't really need it. Plus, I haven't played Landstill in years, I probably get creamed. But the hilarious thing is, 1 mana, it enters play tapped, 1 mana tap, destroy all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. Everybody back in the day used to just tap, sack Nev Disc. We would always say that. One genius figured out, hey, wait a second, it doesn't actually say sacrifice. So they decided to play a 3 mana cost spell called Capsize. 3 mana cost, return target permanent to its owner's hand. You pay an extra 3 mana, the buyback mechanic, you put Capsize back in your hand instead of in the graveyard upon resolution. Activate Nev Disc, Capsize buyback. Put it back to your hand. Well, promptly at that point, a judge was called. The judge looked at it, and he goes, it's legal, he gets to keep Nevenral's Disc in his hand. That started some real hilarious plays. But that's your creature control. Take out some weenies with your quicksands, or double up to take out a larger creature. Or if it gets really hairy, you just reset button the whole board. Now move on to the win conditions. You got your 4 Stalking Stones, which
for 6 mana, they become a 3/3 creature that can still tap for mana, but if you make them a creature, you're not really going to be tapping them for mana probably. This is how you can win on your opponent's turn. Or this is how you can win without tapping mana on your turn and only your opponent's turn. You just activate Stalking Stones and just start beating face with those. If you never have to cast a Nev's Disc, you just activate Stalking Stones. But then we also have your backup win condition, Rainbow Efreet. Now, I gotta talk about the rules back in the day. Back in the day, you could declare a block with something and then phase it out, and it would still be blocked. So you used to like consistently, okay, block, declare block with Rainbow Efreet, pay the 2 blue, phase it out, no combat damage is dealt by the creature or to the creature. That was kind of how we abused Rainbow Efreet. So, you know, for those individuals who used to play Morphling back in Extended when it was legal, you know, people who used to play Morphling in general, we used to be able to do some pretty brutal stuff with Morphling. Rainbow Efreet is where it actually started from, though. I mean, it came from Rainbow Efreet, so I mean, that was like the 3/1 for 4 that flies and can just basically 2 blue mana cancel out any mass removal, targeted removal spell. I mean, that was like the, you know, brilliant blue finisher of the day. And, you know, before Morphling came out, this was like the queen of blue finishers. So, I mean, I love Morphling, but I mean, Rainbow Efreet is where I normally stand with, you know, removal, or I'm sorry, with, you know, amazing blue creatures that, you know, finish the game. And then we have Impulse. Get to look at the top 4 cards, put one of them in your hand. Now, here's the interesting thing. It says, it doesn't say reveal, it just says put it in your hand. And then you put the other 3 on the bottom of your library. The rules have changed. Impulse, you used to be able to actually shuffle your deck. Now the Oracle wording says you can't. So basically it was, you know, I Impulse and say I grab 4 cards. Okay, take the best one, bottom deck the other 3, but then you get to randomize everything. So even if you have a good card on the bottom of your deck, you get to randomize it and it can end up back on top. But one of the cards that really made the deck shine was Whispers of the Muse. 1 mana, draw a card. 5 more mana, the buyback mechanic. So for 6 mana, you just draw a card and you get to keep Whispers of the Muse in your hand. There would be turns where you literally just double up, play 2 Whispers of the Muse, boom, boom, draw 2 cards. And that adds in, and that leads into our second buyback card, which is one of our counter spells, which has 21 counter spells. That's right, we have 21 counter spells. This is literally, this is the deck that pretty much would counter anything you played that was even remotely a threat, that, you know, couldn't be dealt with easily with Quicksand or the Veneral's Disc. You start out with your 4/4 spikes, you know, 1 mana, a 1 mana counter spell, pay 1 or it's countered. We'll move on to our Memory Lapse. Yes, I have Memory Lapses from Homelands. I've played for a while. We have our 3 mana leaks. Now, these came out in Stronghold. I don't have my Stronghold copies anymore. I don't know where the hell they went, but I got the ones from 8th edition at least, so it counts for something. And then we got our 4 counter spells. And we have 2 Dissipates. Now, the reason Dissipate was used, 1, it was a 3 mana cost counter spell. It wasn't really expensive. But you get to remove the spell from the game when you cast it. Now, back in the day, there was a card. People who played Magic around 8th edition, or old school players like myself, will know a card called Hammer of Bogarden. It was a 3 mana red spell, deals 3 damage. But you could then pay, I believe you could pay like 6 mana, 5 or 6 mana, and bring it from your graveyard to your hand. This is how a red deck would basically just wear you out of counter magic. Just keep bringing Hammer of Bogard every turn, boom, bring it back, deal 3. Eventually they're going to start connecting with it because they're going to run you out of counters. So Dissipate allowed us to just say, okay, counter it and remove it from the game. Then we have our second buyback card, Forbid. Counter target spell for 3 mana, buyback, discard 2 cards. Now, originally when people saw Forbid, they looked at it and they were like, man, that's a stupid card. Who would want to discard 2 cards? That's too much card disadvantage. But, did I say dismissed or did I say Forbid? I don't know. Anyway, people looking at Forbid originally dismissed it because they looked at it and it was too much disadvantage. Dropping 2 cards into the graveyard just to keep a counterspell, that just seemed too much. But when you combo it with Whispers of the Muse, where you can draw an extra 2 cards every turn, it doesn't become much of a drawback, because if you have a big mana base already set up, if you haven't used your quicksands or your stalking stones, and you still got those out there and you got like 12 islands, yeah, Whisper of the Muse buyback times 2 seems relatively easy to do, considering you also have 21 counter spells to back all that up with. And then our toughest cast, or our toughest counter spell to cast, is Dismiss. And once again, I had to go out and buy 3 copies from Commander, because I don't have the other 3 from Tempest. 4 mana, counter a spell, draw a card. I mean, you have a lot of card drawing, you have a lot of counter magic. I mean, your sideboard was primarily Capsize, of course, to take advantage of Nev Disc. We used Grindstone as well. Interesting thing about how we played Magic back then. We also ran Wasteland in the sideboard. Most of the time, Wasteland was a sideboard card. We really only brought in against decks that would have a heavy amount of non-basics. That was it. I always thought that was kind of weird. See, playing Legacy now, I mean, hell, any deck I can get Wasteland in, I love it. I'll throw 3 or 4 copies in it just because it's so good. But back then, non-basics, non-basics were non-basics. They weren't as brutal as they are now. But this was a deck that taught me how to play really, really hardcore control. Well, I would say this and Stasis back during Ice Age. This and Stasis taught me hardcore control. And it was amazing because, you'd start out with, like, okay, Force Spike, Memory Lapse, Counter Spell, and then, Impulse for maybe Impulse at the end of your opponent's turn a few times, fire off maybe like, fire off a Forbid without buyback, a Dissipate, maybe a Dismiss or 2. You build up your mana base of islands, your Stalking Stones, your Quicksands, maybe drop a Nev Disc and wipe the board, and then go to town with just, boom, every turn, end of your opponent's turn, Whisper the Muse buyback. Boom, boom, drawing cards. I've done it where I've drawn 3 cards at the end of my opponent's turn. Just boom, give me 3 new cards. I've actually done it where I've cast 3 different copies. I've just dropped all 3 on the stack and just tapped all my lands, and boom, okay, I'll draw 3 right now. Because at that point, I drew those 3, drew 1 card next turn. I had 4 extra cards in my hand, so I could double up on Forbid, and I'd still get it. This was, this was the deck that didn't run out of counterspells back in the day. I remember one game where there was a guy playing like it was a green-white deck, and he had a few creatures that, had like a lifelink ability. And he was at like 37, I believe. And I had activated Stalking Stones, and he went to Sword to Plowshare it, and I was like, fine, whatever, I'll gain 3. I was at 1 life. It was at that point in time, the life total was 37 to 4. I just activated Nevenral's Disc, wiped the board, dropped a Rainbow of Freet, and I just started steamrolling him because I had finally gotten everything I needed. I had the Whisper of the Muse buyback engine running perfectly. I had 2 Forbids in my hand.
and he was in top deck mode. The guy was now in top deck mode. He had ran out of steam, and I just start drawing cards left and right. Boom, boom, boom. I'm drawing 3 cards a turn, and I'm countering whatever he's bringing out. Whatever he's casting, I'm going to cast a Savannah Line, counter it. Whatever. I don't care. Just get rid of it. Who cares? And this little lady right here, Rainbow of Freed, she took him from 37 life. 37 life down to nothing. And I was at 1. And then went up to 4 when he plowed a freaking Stalking Stone. Now what that teaches you, like nail biter games like that, you could say, is it teaches you one simple thing when you play Control. The total of your life doesn't matter until the last point is actually dealt to you. I was at 1 life. I could have just conceded and said, that's it, game. Because I was like, man, I'm at 1 life, he's at 37. But no, I came back and I actually won. I actually ended up winning the round, I think. I won the round. I won the whole round because I won game 1. He took game 2, and game 3 it was that nail biter where I went down to 1 life, and I came back and I won. So I mean, a deck like this teaches you that. Your life total, it's a resource. You got to use it to the best of your ability. And of course, I was doing, double blocks with Stalking Stones and, using a quicksand here or there to, drop a power or drop the toughness of a creature so, I could like chump block without either one dying or something like that. But that's how you got to learn to play Control. You got to pick up a Control deck that's just literally just ass load of counter spells and maybe like 5 creatures total, with a good card drawing engine and some good control variants for the board, and just pick it up and learn it, master it. Because I played Dread still. I played Control in Legacy. When I first started playing Legacy, I did Dread still, Stifle Knot, whatever you want to call it. That was like a really, really just like brand new deck. Like, hey, these guys at Team Hammerfist made this and it's freaking awesome. So I picked it up, the countertop shelf, figured out how that worked. But it was just like playing, Draw-Go almost to me. And learning how to play Mono Blue Draw-Go, CMU Draw-Go in general, this deck, really, really just helped, because it was, it was one of those decks that just literally, if you had everything right, you could just counter everything on your opponent's turn, play Impulse, Whisper of the Muse, start building up your mana base, building up your counter, building up your cards to discard to forbid, and then just, I'm going to activate 2 Stalking Stones at the end of your turn and, beat for 6 for the rest of the game. That's a 4-turn clock. I've done it that way. I've done it with, casting Rainbow of Freets and burning through 3 Nev's discs on heavy aggro decks before. But this is a deck I recommend. If you want to learn how to play Control the way we played it back around 97, 98, like Mono Blue Control, old school Mono Blue Control, this is a deck I recommend. It's going to run you maybe like $50, man. Pick it up at tax time if you got a problem playing Control, and just play the hell out of this. You'll get better at it. You'll get better at Control. You'll get better at Mono Blue. I don't recommend Mono Blue Control for Legacy. It's nice, but it doesn't have the same flavor as the old school Mono Blue Controls like this had. And I really miss that. I really miss the Forbid buyback, Whisper of the Muse buyback days, because those were like, those were the days basically where people just called us nerds and geeks and just never, and basically just left us alone and never wanted to talk to us. I kind of miss those days. I also miss being 16, but that was half of my life ago. Anyways, this is Tristan Blaze. For more of these historic decks that made me the player I am today, like, comment, and subscribe. And be sure to check out my Legacy decks that I actually do play today.